Dear McDonald's, your breakfast menu? Fire. 10s across the board. I could be happy with anything, even though I order the same thing every time. Thanks for not judging me. I'll try something new next time. Maybe.
Score a 2 for $5 deal on a sausage McMuffin with egg and more. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
If you have letters or parcels in the mail, maybe a card for grandma or a video game you're expecting, you may be crossing your fingers they get delivered by the end of tomorrow. That's because, for the second time in around 6 months, 55,000 postal workers across the country could be going on strike. They had taken job action for 32 days toward the end of last year, but the federal government intervened to force workers back on the job and give both sides more time to reach a new collective agreement. Well, they don't have that deal yet, and the clock is ticking down. Just last week, a federally commissioned report declared Canada Post is effectively bankrupt with an $845 million operating loss in 2023. It says the corporation is in an existential crisis and must modernize to survive, with changes such as phasing out daily door-to-door residential delivery and starting weekend parcel deliveries. Now, both the union and Crown Corporation are expressing a desire to hammer out a deal this week, but they appear to still be far apart on major issues like how to modernize and the division of labor between part and full-time workers. Now, outside those two sides, it seems no one is more hopeful for a last-minute deal to happen than small and medium-sized businesses who rely heavily on Canada Post to get their products into the hands of customers. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with Jasmin Guenette, Vice President of National Affairs at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. He's here to talk about the impact a postal labor dispute can have on their members, how he feels postal service should change, and what he hopes the federal government does in the event workers walk off the job. Thanks very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
How nervous are small and medium-sized businesses across Canada about the potential of another postal strike?
Many are extremely nervous. We have to remember that just a few months ago, union workers at Canada Post went on strike during the busiest time of the year, during the holiday. The last strike at Canada Post cost small businesses more than $1 billion because of the financial hit they had to take because of the strike. And so many small business owners are extremely worried. They remember too well the last strike, how costly it was, how impactful it was on their sales and business operation. And, we have our finger crossed that there will not be a strike later this week.
Can you break that down, that $1 billion for us? How was that strike impacting businesses? In what ways? And how did that tally up to $1 billion?
Businesses had to turn to more expensive providers during the last strike. So it increased their cost of doing business. Businesses with sales outside of their province or even outside of the country had to pay a lot more in shipping fees as opposed to those imposed by Canada Post. So that was one of the financial hits. Also, many businesses lost sales because they could not deliver goods and products to their clients, And so many had no choice but to turn down sales. And so customers during the busiest time of the year shopped elsewhere. And so many small firms lost sales because of the strike. And also, if you are in a remote region of the country, more often than not, Canada Post is the only service available for your business. And so you are not able to operate normally if you are just serviced by Canada Post. Obviously, when a strike happened, those businesses are really hit hard by the situation. And so the last strike was quite impactful. And we have to also remember that last year was a terrible year because of all the work stoppages that we had in Canada. Canada Post, Port of Montreal, BC Ports, CN, CPKC, many of those infrastructure needed by small businesses to operate normally had to face work stoppages. And hopefully the situation will not repeat itself this year.
So how are companies bracing for this? Are they taking any steps right now in advance of the potential strike deadline and maybe calling up FedEx, UPS, DHL, whatever other companies are there to try and set up some sort of contract? What are they doing to brace for this?
Obviously, businesses will try to serve their clients the best they can. If they can find other suppliers at a cost they can bear, they will do that. And it's unfortunate for Canada Post. SMEs, small businesses in Canada, are the last reliable customer for Canada Post. And the more small businesses feel uncertain about how reliable Canada Post can be, the more those businesses will switch to other suppliers, increasing Canada Post's financial difficulties. And we hope the union will understand that, and we hope the union will agree to work with Canada Post management to change the business model of Canada Post to make sure that it can go back to be financially viable for the years to come.
Before we get into changing business model of Canada Post, you mentioned, they've been looking more and more at private options as opposed to Canada Post. Has trust already been broken for a lot of businesses, or is it that the price difference is enough that even though there's a lot of turbulence that happens every few years, recently within the last 6 months, are they still going to go back to Canada Post?
Some businesses don't have alternatives to Canada Post. Those in rural communities, those in remote communities, often they don't have any alternatives to Canada Post. Those who have access to alternative services to Canada Post said in a survey after the last strike that they could seek other supplier if the uncertainty remains and if they can find alternative to Canada Post at the price that they can bear. So if Canada Post cannot serve its client properly, obviously those will seek solutions. And for many small businesses, those solutions will be to work with other suppliers that they will feel can be more reliable in the long term.
Okay, we'll have more on the big story with Jasmin Guenette, Vice President of National Affairs at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, in just a moment.
Dear McDonald's, your breakfast menu? Fire. 10s across the board. I could be happy with anything, even though I ordered the same thing every time. Thanks for not judging me. I'll try something new next time. Maybe.
Score a 2 for $5 deal on a sausage McMuffin with egg and more. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
So you brought up the changing business model of Canada Post. There's just last week, the Industrial Inquiry Commission released its report. That was a report that was ordered following last year's strike ahead of the holidays. What do you think of the recommendations, and what are Canadian small and medium-sized businesses looking for in terms of reshaping Canada Post's business model to make it better working for them?
We know that Canada Post is in a very difficult financial situation. Its current model is simply not working. And in order to continue to serve Canadian from coast to coast, the government must give to Canada Post the latitude it needs to make the changes it sees fit to become financially viable again. So will it be to deliver letters less often? Would that be hiring part-time workers during the weekend to deliver packages? I'm not sure what exactly needs to be done in the detail at Canada Post, but it feels like the management at Canada Post have their hands tight. The shareholder of Canada Post is the Canadian government. If the government doesn't give the green light to Canada Post to make the changes that they need to make, they won't be able to make any changes, and we could see again and again strikes be launched in the coming years, or we could see the financial situation of Canada Post getting worse and worse. And so it needs to receive a strong signal by the minister responsible to make the changes that they need to make to be financially viable. And I would even say that this is probably the first test that the new prime minister will have to face. Will he simply ask the parties to stay at the table and find a solution? And that approach did not work in the past. Or will he instruct its minister to make sure that the service provided by Canada Post continues for as long as an agreement can be reached? And will they allow Canada Post to make the changes that they need to make to serve Canadians the way that they could?
Now, when you say the government giving Canada Post the means to change its business model, I mean, it is a crown corporation. It's arm's length of the government, and it makes a lot of its own decisions. Do you mean a legislative change to change the mandate of Canada Post in some ways? Do you mean funding to help it transition? What exactly do you think the government needs to do on that front before we get into back to work legislation or those options?
The last strike ended with the minister using Section 107 of the Labor Code. So that's one way to end the strike. Another way to end the strike is to introduce back to work legislation. In a minority government, I would be very surprised if that tool can be used, only because of the political dynamism between all the parties at the House of Commons.
But changing Canada Post's business model, like let's set the strike mandate or strike notice aside, changing the business model, do you want to see legislative changes from the federal government to change the mandate of Canada Post as a crown corporation? What exactly are you looking for there in terms of changing the business model?
You're right that Canada Post is at arm's length from the government, but it is a crown corporation, and the government can legislate changes to allow Canada Post to make the changes that they need to make in order to stop losing money every year. Government can allow Canada Post to make the changes that they need to make in the way, for example, that they deliver letter to Canadian, the frequency at which they deliver letters to Canadian, and so on. And so, yes, Canada Post is an independent crown corporation, but at the same time, its shareholder is the Canadian government. And as its shareholder, it can instruct Canada Post to make changes that is needed at this time. The marketplace is very competitive when it comes to delivering packages. People are sending less and less letters. And so the marketplace today is not what the marketplace was 20 years ago. If Canada Post just simply continue to do business as they do now, we will have this conversation every year because Canada Post will lose money every year unless they make changes to their business model. And the role of the federal government is to allow Canada Post to do just that. And so, what are those changes exactly? I'm going to leave that to Canada Post management to identify what is needed at the moment. But one thing is for sure, if they don't make any changes, the business model that we have now is deemed to disappear.
Okay, so on that note, delivering parcels on weekends, would that be a big boost for small and medium-sized businesses if Canada Post started delivering parcels on weekends? Would that be one of those changes that you would support?
Well, parcels, packages should be on a 24/7 schedule. I don't understand why UPS and others can deliver on the weekend and Canada Post cannot, unless they pay overtime or have a financial structure that doesn't give them the incentives to operate normally during the weekend. And so if Canada Post want to keep small businesses as one of their top clients, they need to make sure that they can service small businesses when they need service. And sometimes it is at night, and sometimes it is during the weekend.
All right. And then finally, if a strike does occur, how quickly do you want the federal government to act? And you already went over a couple of the different options on the table for the feds. Do you want to see back to work legislation? What do you want to see happen in the event of a strike?
Well, hopefully there will not be a strike launched later this week. If there's a strike, we're going to call the government to immediately intervene, either by introducing a back-to-work legislation or either by using Section 107 of the Canadian Labor Code, like they did the last time Canada Post was on strike. Unfortunately, the last strike was held during the holiday season, the busiest time for many small firms. And the government waited several weeks before intervening. And when they did intervene, the holiday season was lost for the vast majority of small firms. And so if a strike is launched and the government does not intervene rapidly, the impact will be quite significant for many small firms across the country. And that's why this is a leadership test for Mark Carney. This is going to show to Canadian what kind of leadership the new prime minister wants to show he has. And we hope that the situation will be handled rapidly if a strike starts later this week.
Just to follow up on that very quickly, unions argue that, they have a right to strike. And strategically, they do time it around times that are busy so that they have more power at the table when going up against the corporation. How do you respond to those arguments?
The government has a responsibility towards Canadians as a whole. The Job and Family Minister and the Secretary of State of Labor are not there to represent the interest of unions. They are there to make sure that the interest of all Canadians are respected. If a strike paralyzes the entire economy or a good chunk of the economy, it is the responsibility of the government to stop that from happening for too long. And we hope that the interest of the economy, the interest of the vast majority of people will be taken into account, as opposed to solely the interest of the union. Yes, they have the right to strike, but they don't have the right to paralyze the entire economy. Obviously, we all hope that both parties will come to an agreement at the negotiating table. This is absolutely the best outcome. But if an agreement cannot be reached, a strike at Canada Post can simply not last for too long.
All right, Jasmin, we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for your thoughts on all of this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That was Jasmin Guenette, Vice President of National Affairs at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, speaking with me about the impact a postal labor dispute would have on small and medium-sized businesses across Canada and what he hopes the federal government does in the event of a strike. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can also find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.
Dear McDonald's, your breakfast menu? Fire. 10s across the board. I could be happy with anything, even though I ordered the same thing every time. Thanks for not judging me. I'll try something new next time. Maybe.
Score a 2 for $5 deal on a sausage McMuffin with egg and more. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.